but I'll put myself, there we go. Right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to week 4, I think it is. For those of you who don't know me, as it says on the screen, I'm JW3. I head up adult education here at JW3. And it's my pleasure. I obviously wish it wasn't necessary, but thank you so much, Sara, for agreeing to join us this morning from Bar Ilan University. Sara comes highly recommended by Johnny Ranhold, who was with us a couple of weeks ago. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. We know it's not an easy ask, and we've just found over these weeks it's so important for us to get together both on Zoom and in person, in a discussion way, in a listening way. It's just such a difficult time, and it's one of the things that's helped us all, I think, around London especially, and at JW3. So for anyone who's new, the way we run the morning at the moment is that Sara will speak to us for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll open to questions, but I'm going to have all the questions put in the chat. Sorry, I can't speak properly. Put them in the chat, and I will give them to Sara so that we can get through as many as possible. Sara, as I said, it's not an easy task we've set to you, but what is uppermost in your mind this morning that you'd like to share with us, and perhaps also sketch out what you think those around you are feeling nearly a month into this terrible period. So with thanks, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. I really appreciate the fact that you reached out. It means an awful lot to us, the connection. And I'm going to come back to that, I think, a few times. My job at Bar Ilan is that I'm the head of the School of Social Work, and I'm also on the Israeli National Council for PTSD. My professional work has always been working with people after traumatic events, but I'm also here as an Israeli living in Jerusalem with a husband and a son in combat roles who've been called up at the moment. And I think that combination is something that I'd like to share with you. The fact that for all of us here, it's very personal in a way that it has never been to this extent, I think, in the past. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about what the experience is on the day-to-day life of the last 4 weeks and how that's panning out. A little bit also about what we've been doing in general in Bar Ilan, just as an example, I think, of what's going on, and then maybe more generally of how we're trying to help people. I'm actually going to start with how you started, Judy, which is about the hi, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. I think it's it's a trivial in one sense, but it's also very profound. That sort of normal beginning of a conversation has just disintegrated. You can't say that anymore. It's disappeared. And I think that it illustrates in a very profound way how much this is affecting every single person. It actually touches me a lot that you're also finding it difficult in the same way. And so, every conversation starts with some sort of direction to what's going on. Even, just emails or WhatsApps are, I hope you're okay given the circumstances. Nothing is normal anymore. The numbers, I think, are hard to understand, especially even living here, but maybe especially not living here. But the numbers are just very difficult to comprehend. We're such a small community. There isn't anybody who isn't personally impacted by what's been going on. It's always true because Israel's small, but this is particularly difficult. And in addition to those who were killed initially, and who there are still some people who are missing, and obviously people who have been kidnapped. Then in addition, there's at least 130,000 Israelis who are not living in their homes anymore. They've been moved out. Some of them have left communities that have been completely destroyed. Some of them have left houses that have been destroyed, even though the community is still there. And some of them have left in the north. So far, few things have actually physically been happening, but they're not there anymore. Some of them are living in hotels. sometimes with the other members of the community and sometimes not. And this has an incredible impact on just their ability to function, in a daily way. Life here is strange. There are certain places in the country, like up north, where everything's pretty much abandoned. Nobody's there. People have been moved out. If you come to places like Jerusalem, then it seems pretty much normal. Cafes are open and things, except that it's not, because things are shutting early. We actually had a family visit of our soldiers this week, and we said, well, let's go out and have a coffee and have something. And the place said, look, we're really, really sorry, but most of the things on our menu are not available because things are just not here. I think at the very beginning, I think you touched upon this, were not functioning the first week. They very quickly started to move to things that were online, and then wherever possible to bring children back in. I think that's something that's very important. I think it's something the whole world has learned from Corona, that having children within a framework is very important, not so much for what they're learning, but for the social and health aspects of that. Obviously, for the 130,000 people, including many families who are not at home, then schools are much more complicated. They are trying to set those up, but sometimes that's, if you imagine the last time you were in a hotel in Tel Aviv, then, the dining room has been taken over by lots of children sitting around trying to learn something. It's a very different experience. Many people are not working, partly because they're not living at home, so their businesses are not functioning. Some people because they've just been let off from work because there's not enough work to go around. So those things obviously have a big impact. One of the things that I think is very important to anyone living here, which is the constant rocket attacks. There are about 300 a day. Most of them, I think, don't make the news, even here, because, if nothing dramatic happens, but they have an incredible impact on anybody here. In some ways, I think also that the people who lived in the South and were used to this, I'm not saying it was ever easy, it never was, but the people who live in the Tel Aviv area is a much more rare experience, I think, are finding it even more hard because they are not used to it at all. There are many people living in areas where their setup is not is not ideal for this situation. So if you happen to be living somewhere with a safe room in your house, then running to it with, here we have 90 seconds to get there, then, that's okay. You might be in the shower though, so that makes those 90 seconds a lot less, goes much quicker. But many of us live also in places where there isn't a safe room in the house. I live in a building that has been around for about 70 years, so there's somewhere downstairs, so we're having much more fun with our neighbors than we usually do every time we run downstairs to see them. But again, for some people that is much harder. If you're in your 80s and you find just walking from one room to the other a challenge, then running in or trying to get downstairs is almost impossible. And again, in the past, this has been something that happens maybe once, twice, 10 times, but with 300 rockets a day, then it means many people are doing this again and again and again over a day. I work with somebody who, with many people who are in the army, and she had a period of every time she'd try and go home, 10 o'clock at night, then she'd find herself lying on the floor by her car, couldn't actually get home because there'd be another attack. So these are sort of daily stressors that are impacting everybody. To look at it in terms of some numbers, I think, we know how many people have been called up. That what that translates to in my department, because it's a department, a School of Social Work, then we have more women than men, because that's how it works. But we still have 8 people who are in the army who've been called up. And out of our students, about 10% have been called up, but we have another maybe 30%, I'm not sure of the numbers, who have family members who've been called up, which means that many of them are at home with small kids, looking after their kids, not able to do what they're normally doing because their partner is not around. Many people have more than one family member, 2, 3, 4, 10, who are in the army. Obviously, this makes, you know, their ability to do things even harder. And again, out of the number of people who are missing and injured and killed, then everybody knows somebody. To put this in, again, a more personal perspective, in one of my kids' schools, in the last 2 weeks, there's already been 3 people who are either students who were at the school or their family members. And both my husband and son came home for a day's leave, and both had to go to a different funeral of somebody they knew, of a soldier that had been killed. So this is a reality that I think a month ago none of us could possibly have imagined, even those who'd been here and lived through many wars in the past. There's never been anything like that. So it's unprecedented. But what's also, I think, unprecedented is to see the other side, which is the amazing community that we're seeing come out of all of that. So just to give you an example of Bar Ilan, I know that Johnny mentioned that, you know, we've been calling people, but I want to explain what that actually looks like. You know, this was faculty members who were picking up the phone and saying, "Hi, how are you?" to every single student, including students that we've never met because they haven't started yet, because the universities haven't gone back. And some of those conversations were, you know, "I'm just phoning to check in," and the person said, "That's very nice and thank you very much," and carried on. But some of them were not like that. Some of them were people expressing quite how difficult it was, that they'd lost multiple people already, that they had members of their family or their friends who were missing, that they weren't living at home, and so on. And one of the other things that we've done at Bar Ilan, and this is a lot of people on my faculty, is actually do groups for the faculty members, both admin and academic, to help them know how to cope with this, because they're all affected and all the people they're talking to are affected. I think it's absolutely incredible that as a community and as a university, and I know we're not the only one, that this outreach has happened. We've also set up a hotline for people that's staffed by people from my department, psychology department, a department of art therapy, so people can phone pretty much any hour of the day and get support. We also have some free therapy for people who need anything more than that. And some of the calls that are coming through are on the level of, you know, it's a rocket attack and I don't know what to do, but some of them are much, much, much harder and more serious, and reflect the difficulties that people are going through at the moment. One of the other things that we've done is a collaboration between social work and psychology and the medical school. And there's been a couple of teddy bear hospitals. And at the teddy bear hospitals, kids can come along with their teddy bears and get some advice on how to cope with what's going on, and turning the kids, these little kids, into people who, or giving them the skills to know how to cope and telling them that they're the experts. And we had a lovely story about somebody who works in my department, took her children along, and she said about 2 days later, there was an attack, there was a rocket attack while the children were at kindergarten. And one of her kids came in with the poster that she'd made at the teddy bear hospital saying, "Listen, I know what to do and I know how to help everybody." So those are things that I think are amazing that have been done. And obviously, everybody's working day and night with the people who have been displaced, bereaved, coping with different amounts of loss. And this reflects a myriad number of different levels of help, from giving supervision to people. Between us, I think we've trained something like 250 mental health practitioners in the army, just in the army, apart from going to 3 or 4 or 5. I've run out of, you know, different hospitals to train staff. And generally helping, producing some guidelines. For example, I'm working with kids with special needs at this time, and in general trying to outreach as much as possible. And I think that that's something that this idea of, you know, community is really builds resilience. It's really, really, really helpful. And so I'm going to go back to where I started with what I said was that just asking us to be part of, and talk to you is really important. Every time someone sends a message, that's really, really important. And I think that, I'm sure that you're all in contact with your friends and your family in Israel. And I just think it's something that we just want to say thank you, because it really makes a difference. It's incredibly isolating. And I think any of us who we try to watch the news as little as possible and to watch social media as little as possible to get away from the vitriol, but that's what you see. And to know that there are people who see it differently is very important. And I think that that's what essentially what is going to get us through. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
Thank you so much. Let me just put myself next to you. So I think there were two strands that people have questioned about that you were talking about. So let's go to the one that you mentioned right at the beginning, which you didn't put it this way, but with people, the hospitality not being able to be open as usual, which is obviously for someone like me that finds cafe culture very important, I think that's awful. But I have heard so many comments about, Jerusalem's quiet, everything's empty, Tel Aviv's quiet, probably not quite as much as Jerusalem, but still much more than usual. Obviously, there are no tourists around because the flights are still difficult, and people are scared to come in as well. It's worrying here, but you don't choose, and you can't do anything when you get there because all you're doing is sheltering from the attacks. So that leaves us wondering, and I know this isn't your area, but the economy is going to be so hard hit.
Yeah.
Is there any talk about that yet, or is it just too early?
No, I think there is. I mean, just on a university level, I think many of the universities, including Bar Ilan, have already offered their students scholarships because they know how difficult this will be. I think there is talk about support on the level that there was during Corona to help people. I think that people are trying to do things, to buy and to go out and to do things, even though it might not look the same as normal. So, for example, at least once a week in Jerusalem, there's like a farmers market from people from down south. So a way of supporting that. So there are things that are happening, but I am sure that the long-term effects economically will be staggering, without a question. So
moving that onto the other point you meant, which is they have lost the number. I think it's 130,000 that have been displaced, had to move for whatever reason, whether it's just that it's too dangerous to stay or they've actually lost their home. Again, I'm assuming that they're not having to put their hands in their own pockets to pay for this accommodation that they've been moved into. I assume the government is doing that. Is that correct?
Yeah. There's definitely help. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and again, going forward, I mean, those who have, where it's just been destroyed, is it too early for the conversation to be happening about what's going to happen for them? They obviously can't stay in hotels. They may not want to go back to their original home or area.
I think that, yes, I mean, it is too early, but on the same time, there's obviously talk about it. I think some communities are very determined to stay together as a community. I think other people maybe less so. I think that one of the things that is sort of strange but understandable about Israel is that everybody has their own mental map about what's dangerous and what's not. So I actually have family members from Sderot who don't like visiting other family members who live somewhere that they consider even more dangerous. So everybody has their own, idea of what yes and what no. It's obviously going to take a long time. I think most of these people have been told to prepare for many months of this status before things can be sorted. But I again, without actually knowing what's planned and how it will be planned, one of the things that I think Israel is really, really strong about and always has been and is very important for resilience is getting the physical things back together as quickly as possible. If any of you were in Jerusalem in the years where there were terrorist attacks, then I think it was remarkable that pretty much people would still be in hospital, but the outside area was already made to look like as close as it could be to what was before. And those things make it, I mean, they sound trivial, but they make a very big difference. And so I think that there are a lot of people who know how important it is to be able to rehabilitate people for, you know, in terms of this, and it will happen, but it will take a long time.
Yes, it's something that we don't get to hear about. So you were saying about the rocket attacks. I've actually signed up. I kind of regret it, but can't not keep it on. Every time there's a siren, I get a Jerusalem Post flash saying the siren is going off in. And I can't not get that. It feels wrong not to be knowing, because you're right, we don't get it here. It's only a siren. Why would they keep on reporting it? Unfortunately, they're only interested in much more hard news that pulls at the tugs at the hearts and so on, all of that. But yes, those of us that do sign up for that at least are aware of how many are going off, and I think it's important to keep on reminding people this is happening all the time. However much we worry here. And of course, being in a Jewish centre, you know, we had a lot at the beginning of, you know, are you closing? Is it safe? Is it? Of course, we were set up to be as protected as possible. So I'm warning my son not to go into town, because I think that the attacks on non-Jewish bigger areas are just as likely, if not more likely. But we, as you say, we all do that in a very different, you know, it's what affecting us is that, but that's with everything, isn't it? And one of the things we've done here is, not everybody will be aware of, in the mornings we have Israeli activities for the children that have been, the families that have been, stayed here, they've not gone back, or they've come here for a respite. Right. So we've opened our doors and space to, I'm not sure how many, but I know there's a long waiting list, so it's very fun. It's just wonderful for us to have the Israeli children around, behaving in a much quieter way than usual, because they're affected. However little they know, because they're only between 0 and 4, they're still affected, and it's been astonishing to see that. They're beginning to come around a bit now. I've noticed, you know, paper darts starting to appear and a bit more noise appearing, which is what you want, of course. It's
absolutely.
But it's a little thing that we can do. Okay, I think because those were the areas, and let me just check that I've covered everything. I love the teddy bear hospital. I think we should introduce teddy bears here as well. We forget how important teddy bears can be. That's amazing. And the fact that you said that that this is so different, I think that's again what struck us so much. This feeling of needing to be together, being so important, both in person and on these Friday briefings. That you're right, you know, we've been affected by wars before, we've been affected by rockets, by attacks, by terror attacks, but not like this. This was something so different, and therefore our response has been so different. And to see the community come together worldwide has just been really heartening for all of us, I think. Yeah, it has been astonishing. So we've just had a question in from Glynis. So what will be the impact of PTSD, and what will be put in place? Hard question as well, but
yeah. But you're asking somebody who's actually, we're trying to understand that. There are two, I think, answers to this. The first answer is we just don't know, because, as I said, it's unprecedented. We have never had this. We are trying to understand what we think is going to happen, and put into place as much training as possible. So I think there are a couple of things that are important here. Firstly, that there are not enough psychological and psychiatric services even before this. Children are waiting something like 12 to 18 months for a psychologist since Corona. So that there's a deficit even before this even starts. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think there's a combination here of many things that worry us as mental health professionals, partly because of the whole communities, partly because the level of bereavement is very different. I think, you know, we've all unfortunately lost family members, but there are people here who've lost whole families at one time, or whole groups of friends at one time. And that is a different level of bereavement. There's also going to be a lot of what we call traumatic bereavement, because the actual way that people died, I hope, the atrocities are so extreme, and that will definitely have an impact. And that's without the, what we touched upon about, not having somewhere to live, and not having education, and not having, all of those things are definitely, not having a job. Those things are also going to impact. But we are working on trying to set up something that will increase the numbers of professionals and non-professionals, people in the community who can help at different levels. Everybody from, from the general practitioner, the rabbi, the person, the nurse, anybody who, so everybody will have some skills that will be able to help with that, and to upskill all the people that we do have, to train them as quickly as possible, and carry on giving them support, and in order to and supervision for as long as possible, so that people don't fall through the cracks. So there's a lot of thought about how that needs to be set up. We are getting advice internationally as well, on people who've had to do this, for example, in the Ukraine and other places, about how to do this well. I think that this is one area that maybe, unlike Yom Kippur War, there's so much more awareness. And so, those things are working in a way that they haven't been before. And I'll tell you, this morning, just on a personal level, this morning I was on the phone to my husband, and somebody was trying to get hold of me. And this person is a friend of mine who has about at least 4 family members in the army, and she kept on phoning. And so my heart was in my throat, trying to, what's happened? And she was phoning because somebody had approached her, like friends of theirs, whose son wasn't doing well in the army psychologically, and she wanted to know what was going to happen. And that was, on the one hand, a relief, and it was also a relief to be able to tell her what I know, which is that there are they have so many people who are in the army in order to help with mental health needs. So that they're approachable, they're able, and we've, they've been trained, and they're in touch, and that's something which I think is incredibly important, and I hope will mitigate some of the effects in the long term, but it's going to be a very big challenge.
Thank you. And yes, I think we always seem to finish on a challenge, because that's the period we're in. So thank you so much, Sara. That was just fascinating, and a different approach from the last few weeks. Next week, we have a completely different approach again, with Paul Gross, who's a historian, also originally from Britain, and the following week with David Newman, who was also originally from Britain. And details will be on the web very shortly about those two. And on Tuesday evening, I mentioned to some of you yesterday, it's now up online, that we've got the Lieutenant General speaking, and I have again forgotten his name. It will be online, but if you just put in Israel, Aviv Kochavi will be speaking to us here on Tuesday evening. That will also be live streamed. So Sara, thank you again. Our love to everybody at Bar Ilan, and we hope your families stay safe and well, and in touch with you regularly. And thank you all for joining us this morning from wherever you've joined in from, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a safe and peaceful weekend. Take care, everyone.